I was doing 73 miles an hour down I-40 with my wife in active labor when I finally understood that my parents were never going to become the people I needed them to be. Not because of therapy. Not because of some clean, mature conversation where everyone sat in a circle and admitted what they had done. Because Maren was folded sideways in the passenger seat, one hand locked around the door handle, the other crushed inside mine whenever the contractions hit. And I was trying to keep the car between two white lines while her water soaked through the towel I had thrown under her 5 minutes earlier. It was 9:17 p.m. on a Friday in October. Raleigh was blinking ahead of us in the dark. A semi drifted half a lane toward my bumper near the Wade Avenue exit, and for 1 second I had to choose between looking at the road and looking at my wife's face. "Caleb," she gasped. "I know," I said. Though I did not know anything except this drive. Drive because your wife needs you. Drive because your son needs you. Drive because the people sitting in your parents' dining room had decided a stranger's investment pitch mattered more than both of them. Back in Cary, my mother was probably refilling Adrian Vale's wine glass. My father was probably nodding at words like scalable grid intelligence and 8-figure valuation, pretending he understood them. My sister Sloane was probably smiling, like she had finally purchased a future none of us were allowed to question. And I kept replaying the dining room, the silver-rimmed plates, the prime rib cooling in the center of the table, Maren's face going pale, my voice saying, "Her water broke, I need help getting her to Wake Med, now." And my father leaning back like I had asked him to miss dessert. "Call a cab," he said. "We're busy. You need to understand the kind of family I came from before that sentence makes complete sense. I was what people now call a glass child. Not sick, not loud, not obviously broken, just useful enough, quiet enough, and capable enough that everyone around me eventually stopped checking whether I was still there. Glass children learn early that needing things creates problems. We learn to pack our own lunches, sign our own permission slips, keep our grades high, and swallow pain before it becomes inconvenient to someone else. We do not get ignored because we are difficult. We get ignored because we made being easy look effortless. My younger sister, Sloane, was never glass. Sloane was visible from the day she was born. Bright, dramatic, delicate in the exact way my mother loved. She cried loudly, wanted loudly, failed loudly, and every failure became a family emergency. If Sloane had a violin audition, the house rearranged itself around her. If Sloane had a headache, my mother lowered the lights and whispered. If Sloane wanted something, my father found a way to call it an investment. When I was 11, I fell off my bike in the driveway and landed wrong on my left wrist. I still remember the sound more than the pain. A small, wet snap followed by a hot flash that shot straight up my arm. I walked inside holding my wrist against my stomach, trying not to cry because I already knew crying made my father impatient. My mother looked at it, then looked at the clock. "Sloane's audition is in 30 minutes, she said. "Can you wrap it and wait until we get back?" So, I wrapped it. I sat at the kitchen table with a bag of frozen peas melting into a dish towel, while my wrist swelled purple and my parents clapped for my sister across town. They came back 3 hours later. My father said, "You should have told us it was that bad." That was the rule in our house. If I stayed quiet, I did not need help. If I asked for help, I asked wrong. 20 years later, standing in my parents' dining room with my wife in labor beside me, I realized nothing had changed. They had simply found a new way not to see me by the time everything happened. I was 31 years old, married, employed, and still somehow waiting for my parents to look at me like I counted. My wife, Maren, was 39 weeks pregnant, and carrying our first child with the kind of quiet strength people mistake for ease. She was an elementary school counselor before the pregnancy got rough enough that her doctor told her to slow down. Even then, she kept answering emails from parents, checking on students, and apologizing for needing rest like rest was a moral failure. That was one of the first things I loved about her, and one of the things I hated seeing the world take advantage of. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of Raleigh. Not fancy, not impressive from the outside, but ours. I worked as a cybersecurity analyst for a hospital network, which meant long hours, quiet pressure, and the kind of job nobody in my family understood because it did not come with a title they could brag about at dinner parties. To my parents, security analyst sounded like I fixed passwords. They liked men with loud confidence, men who said words like equity, valuation, expansion, market capture, Men who wore watches too large for their wrists and talked over waiters. Men like Adrian Vale. My parents, Robert and Elaine Morgan, lived in Cary in a house that photographed beautifully and bled money from every wall. Fresh landscaping, new SUV in the driveway, crystal glasses, silver-rimmed plates, a dining room table polished like a showroom floor. From the outside, they looked stable. I knew better. I knew about the second refinance. I knew about the credit cards my mother rotated like shell games. I knew my father had spent the last decade chasing one opportunity after another. Always one smart investment away from being the kind of man he thought he deserved to be. Then Sloan brought home Adrian. Adrian was 34, handsome in a manufactured way, with perfect teeth, a leased Porsche, and blazers that looked expensive until you noticed they pulled too tight when he moved. He claimed to be the founder of a clean tech startup called Heliogrid Systems, a company he described differently every time someone asked what it actually did. AI-driven power optimization, decentralized grid intelligence, predictive energy infrastructure. My father listened like Adrian was translating the future directly into English. My mother looked at him like he was a rescue boat. And Sloan, my golden child sister, sat beside him glowing with ownership, like she had finally brought home proof that she had won. I met him once before that dinner. My first thought was simple: polished surface, nothing underneath. My parents saw salvation. That difference would end up costing them everything. I did not want to go to that dinner. Maren was 39 weeks pregnant, exhausted, swollen in ways she tried to joke about, and moving through the apartment with one hand under her belly like she was carrying something made of glass. My mother called 5 times that week. This is important, Caleb. Adrian is serious about Sloan. This could change the future of the family. I should have said no. Instead, I heard the old machinery inside me start turning. Be reasonable. Don't make trouble. Show up. Prove you are not selfish. So I helped my wife into the car and drove to Cary. The first thing I noticed when we walked into my parents' house was that Adrian was sitting at the head of the table, my father's chair. Nobody said anything about it. Robert Morgan had spent my entire childhood treating that chair like a throne. Nobody sat there. Not guests, not relatives, not me. Even after I became old enough to pay my own rent and file my own taxes. But Adrian Vale, a man my parents had known for less than 3 months, was already settled into it with one ankle crossed over his knee and a glass of red wine in his hand. My mother floated around him like a hostess at a fundraiser. Caleb, she said when she saw us. Then her eyes dropped immediately to Maren's belly. Oh good, you made it. Not. How are you feeling? Not. Maren. Do you need to sit down? Just. You made it. Like our attendance had been a late delivery she had been tracking. Sloan came in from the dining room wearing a cream sweater dress and the satisfied expression of someone who had already won an argument nobody else knew they were having. Adrian was just explaining the pilot program, she said. You missed the beginning. Sorry, I said automatically. Maren squeezed my hand once. She knew that word had old roots in me. We sat near the end of the table, farthest from my father's chair, because that was where my mother had placed our settings. Maren lowered herself carefully into the chair beside me. One hand braced under her stomach. I watched her face tighten for half a second before she smoothed it out. You okay? I whispered. Yeah, she said. Just pressure. Adrian kept talking. Heliogrid, according to that version of the pitch, was no longer just clean tech. Now it was a predictive infrastructure intelligence layer for municipal power grids. He said it like he expected applause after every noun. My father leaned forward, elbows nearly on the table, eyes bright and hungry. So the city contracts would be recurring, he asked. Exactly, Adrian said. That's the beauty of it. Once you're embedded in the infrastructure, you're not a vendor anymore. You're essential. My mother made a soft sound, almost reverent. Maren shifted beside me. I looked down. Her hand was pressed against the underside of her belly. Fingers spread, knuckles pale. Another minute passed. Then she inhaled sharply through her nose and stopped moving altogether. I put my hand over hers under the table. How long? I whispered. She swallowed. I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe Braxton Hicks. But her voice had changed. There is a way people sound when they are trying not to scare you. Maren had used that voice on children at school, on parents who arrived angry, on me when the doctor told her to monitor her blood pressure and she did not want me to panic. Calm words, tight breath, eyes telling the truth before the mouth allowed it. Across the table, Adrian was describing an 8-figure valuation. My mother noticed Maren breathing through her nose and frowned. Marin. Honey. Are you uncomfortable? The word honey had no warmth in it. A little, Marin said. I'm fine. She's 39 weeks pregnant, I said. My mother gave me a look. Yes. Caleb. We're all aware. Sloane sighed quietly. Just loud enough to be heard. That was the moment the room split in my mind. On one side, there was Adrian talking about money that did not exist yet. On the other, there was my wife trying to breathe through something that was becoming less theoretical by the second. Another contraction came 7 minutes later. This one bent Marin forward before she could hide it. I pushed my chair back. Bathroom? I whispered. She nodded. But when she tried to stand, her hand clamped down on my forearm so hard I felt her nails through my sleeve. Caleb, she said, barely audible. My chest went cold. My mother's fork paused halfway to her plate. Could you two please not make this dramatic? She said under her breath. Adrian was getting to the investment structure. I looked at her. For 1 second I saw the whole table clearly. My father watching Adrian. Sloane watching herself be admired. My mother watching Marin like discomfort was bad manners. And me, still sitting at the end. Still trying to make my emergency small enough not to inconvenience anyone. Then Marin's face changed. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Caleb, she whispered. This is real. Marin's water broke at 7:46 p.m. in my mother's dining room. There was no dramatic movie moment, no music, no sudden understanding from the people around us. Just Marin freezing beside me, both hands gripping the edge of the table, her face draining of color as the truth arrived before anyone in that room was willing to acknowledge it. Caleb, she whispered. I stood so fast my chair scraped backward across the hardwood. Her water broke, I said. Every head turned toward me. My mother's mouth tightened first, not with fear, not with concern, with embarrassment. Caleb, she hissed, lower your voice. I looked at my father. I need help getting her to Wake Med. Right now. Marin tried to breathe through another contraction. Her knees buckled slightly, and I caught her by the elbow before she dropped. That should have changed the room. That should have made every adult at that table move. Nobody moved. Adrian sat there with his wine glass suspended halfway between the table and his mouth, looking irritated in the polished way rich men look when service is slow. Sloane stared at Marin's dress, then at the chair, and made a small, disgusted sound. Oh my God, she said. Are you serious right now? I turned on her. My wife is in labor. This dinner is important, Sloane snapped. Adrian was literally explaining the investor entry point. You always do this. I almost laughed because the accusation was so insane, it left reality for a second. My father leaned back in his chair, the chair Adrian had taken. Robert Morgan looked at my wife in active labor, then at the man promising him money, and I watched him choose. Caleb, he said, calm and disappointed, like I had failed an etiquette test. This is not the time. I stared at him. Dad, Adrian is discussing a real opportunity for this family, he continued. We cannot all just abandon dinner because Marin has bad timing. Marin made a sound into my sleeve. Something inside me went completely still. I need one of you to drive behind us, I said. Or call ahead, or help me get her to the car. My father picked up his wine glass. Call a cab, he said. We're busy. I did not argue. That is the part people always expect to be louder when I tell it. They expect me to say I slammed my fists on the table, called my father a coward, told my mother exactly what kind of woman watches another woman go into labor and worries about upholstery. I did none of that. There was no room inside me for speeches. I had Marin's weight against my side, her fingers locked around my wrist, her breath coming in short, controlled bursts that were getting harder for her to hide. So, I picked up the hospital bag from beside the front door. I took my wife out of that dining room. No one followed. On the porch, the October air hit us cold enough to clear my head for half a second. I paused with one arm around Marin and listened. A chair scraped inside. For one insane moment, I thought it meant my father had stood up. I thought maybe there was still one human reflex left in him. Maybe he was coming with keys in his hand, shame on his face, saying, Caleb, wait. Then I heard Adrian's voice start again, smooth, unbothered. My mother laughed softly. Marin bent forward with another contraction, and I held her upright with both arms. I'm sorry, she whispered. That broke something in me. You don't apologize, I said. Not for this, not to them. I got her into the passenger seat, buckled her in, and shut the door carefully. Then I looked at my parents' house one last time. Light in every window, no one coming out. I walked around to the driver's side and made myself one promise before I opened the door. Get them out. Get your real family out. I-40 eastbound on a Friday night is ugly, even when nobody in your car is trying not to give birth. Construction cones narrowed the lanes near the split. Headlights stacked behind me in hard white lines. Every driver seemed angry, impatient, convinced their destination mattered more than physics. I drove with both hands on the wheel and Marin's breathing filling the car. In for 4, out for 6. Then the rhythm broke. Another one, I asked. She nodded. Eyes squeezed shut. One hand clamped around the seatbelt across her chest. I checked the dashboard clock. 5 minutes. They were 5 minutes apart now. A cold, precise kind of fear moved through me, the kind that did not shake or scream because it understood there was no time for either. My wife was in the passenger seat. My son was coming, and the only useful thing I could do was keep the car moving. A semi drifted towards us near the exit ramp, its tires crossing the white line slow and heavy, like the driver had fallen asleep. I hit the horn and held it. The sound ripped through the car. Marin flinched. The truck corrected. My right hand wanted to reach for her. My eyes stayed on the road. I'm here, I said. I know, she whispered, but her voice had thinned. I hit the voice command on the steering wheel. Call Marcus Reed. Marcus had been my best friend since community college, back when both of us were taking night classes and pretending 4 hours of sleep was a lifestyle choice. He had worked as a paramedic for 6 years before moving into emergency dispatch training, which meant he was exactly the person you called when the world narrowed to blood pressure, distance, and seconds. He picked up on the first ring. Caleb, Marin's in labor. Water broke. I'm on I-40 heading to Wake Med. A half-second pause. Where are your parents? They told me to call a cab. The line went quiet in a way that was not confusion. It was rage being placed carefully on a shelf for later. Listen to me, Marcus said, his voice changing into something flat and professional. Do not speed more than you can control. Put me on speaker. How far apart are contractions? 5 minutes. Maybe less. Marin, can you hear me? Yes, she breathed. Good. You're doing great. Don't push unless your body gives you no choice. Caleb, keep her breathing. I'm calling Wake Med on the other line and telling them you're coming in hot. Then, I'm calling her parents. Another contraction hit before he finished. Marin grabbed my forearm. Hard enough to hurt. I welcomed the pain. It meant she was still here with me. Drive, Marcus said. I am. No. Caleb, hear me. Your job is not to fix your parents tonight. Your job is to get your wife and son through those doors. The hospital signs appeared ahead. Blue and white through the dark. I pressed the accelerator with control. Not panic. Drive. Your wife and son need you to drive. The emergency entrance at Wake Med appeared out of the dark like something merciful. I pulled into the drop-off lane too fast, braked too hard, and threw the car into park with the engine still running. I did not care about the car. I did not care about the angle. I did not care that half the front tire was over the curb. I got out and ran around to Marin's side. Before I could get her door fully open, a security guard was already moving toward us. Then he saw her. His whole face changed. I need a wheelchair, he shouted over his shoulder. Labor and delivery. Now. Marin tried to swing her legs out, then stopped, both hands clamping around her stomach. Caleb, she said, I've got you. I had said that sentence 100 times in our marriage. When she was tired, when the car broke down, when a doctor called with test results. But that night, it felt less like comfort and more like a contract I had signed with my entire body. I've got you, even if no one else does. 2 nurses came through the sliding doors at a controlled sprint. One of them, a short woman with gray-streaked hair and the calm authority of someone who did not need to raise her voice to take command, put one hand on Marin's shoulder and one on mine. How far apart, she asked. 5 minutes, I said. Maybe less. Water broke about an hour ago. You drove her yourself. Yes. The nurse looked at me for half a second, and something in her expression sharpened. Not judgment. Recognition. Then she turned to Marin. Okay. Sweetheart, we're going to take care of you now. Those words almost undid me. Not because they were dramatic, because they were practical, because someone saw the emergency and responded to it like it mattered. They moved fast. Wheelchair, triage, monitors, a hospital gown, an IV line. Questions I answered because Marin was breathing through another contraction and could barely speak. Name. Due date. Any complications? How long since her water broke? I followed beside the bed as they rolled her down the hall, one hand wrapped around hers, the other still holding my phone because Marcus had not hung up until he heard a nurse confirm we were inside. Then Marin's grip tightened. I looked down. Her eyes were wet. Not from fear exactly, but from exhaustion. "I'm scared," she whispered. I leaned close enough that my forehead almost touched hers. "I know," I said, "but you're not alone. Not for 1 second. Our son was born just after midnight. He came out furious." That was my first thought. Not poetic, not spiritual, just furious. Red-faced, screaming, offended by air, light, temperature, and possibly all of us personally. Then the doctor placed him on Marin's chest, and he stopped, just stopped. His tiny body settled against her like he had reached the only place in the world he had been trying to get to. Marin made a sound I had never heard from her before, something broken open and whole at the same time. I stood beside the bed, one hand on her shoulder, staring at him. 6 pounds, 7 ounces, dark hair, one fist pressed against his own cheek. My son. For 31 years. Family had meant endurance to me. It meant reading the room, swallowing what hurt, being useful enough to keep around, but never needy enough to disturb the people who mattered more. Then I looked at Marin holding our son, and the word changed shape. Family was not blood. Family was who moved toward you when you were bleeding, terrified, and asking for help. Marcus arrived first, still in sweatpants, face tight with everything he was not saying. He hugged me once, hard, then stepped back and asked what we needed. Frank and Judith, Marin's parents, arrived at 2:18 a.m. after driving from Greensboro without stopping. Judith went straight to Marin and kissed her forehead. Frank put one hand on my shoulder. No lecture, no questions about drama, no performance. Just one sentence. "Tell me where to stand, son." At 2:43 a.m., while Marin was asleep in the hospital bed and our son was swaddled in the bassinet between us, my phone lit up on the tray table. Missed calls. 3 from my mother, 1 from my father. Nothing from Sloan. No texts. No. "Is Marin okay?" No. "Did the baby come?" No. "We are sorry." Just 4 missed calls arriving after the emergency was already over. Like my parents had waited until there was no chance they would be asked to help before deciding they were ready to speak. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I played the first voicemail on speaker. My mother's voice filled the room, tight and offended. "Caleb, it's your mother. I don't know what you thought you were accomplishing tonight, but you embarrassed this family." Sloan was humiliated. Adrian left early because the mood was completely ruined. "Your father and I are extremely disappointed in how dramatic you chose to be." Marin shifted in her sleep. I looked at our son. He made a small sound, one tiny breath through his nose, and my chest tightened so hard I could barely inhale. My mother kept going. Marin was probably just uncomfortable. Pregnant women exaggerate these things all the time. "You owe your sister an apology. Adrian's opportunity is important, Caleb. This could affect all of us." The voicemail ended. My father's came next. "Son," he said, using the word like a tool he had taken out of a drawer, "you need to calm down and think about the bigger picture. That dinner mattered. Adrian is talking about real money. And you know, your mother and I have been trying to stabilize things. You walking out like that made us look ridiculous." A pause. Then the sentence that sealed whatever was left. "When you're done making a point, call your mother and fix this." I sat completely still. There was no explosion in me, no shouting, no shaking rage, just a clean, cold silence. I opened my contacts. Mom, block contact. Dad, block contact. Sloan, block contact. Then I picked up Marin's phone from beside her water cup and did the same thing there. When I set both phones face down on the tray table, it felt less like revenge and more like closing a door before smoke could get into the nursery. The first week home was not peaceful. People say that, like bringing a newborn home is soft lighting and whispered joy. Some of it is. Most of it is survival with smaller socks. Marin's body was trying to repair itself from the inside out. She moved slowly, one hand braced against the wall, trying to pretend every step did not hurt because she hated feeling like a burden. Our son woke every 90 minutes with the furious certainty that hunger was a betrayal. The apartment smelled like milk, antiseptic wipes, reheated soup, and the laundry we were too tired to fold. And underneath all of it, under the feedings and diapers and quiet alarms on my phone, there was the wreckage of my family sitting in the corner of every room. I did not cry in front of Marin, not because I was trying to be tough, because she had enough pain in her body without me asking her to carry mine too. So I learned to break down in small, efficient ways. 30 seconds with my forehead against the bathroom door. One hard breath in the parking lot before walking back upstairs with groceries. A hand pressed against the kitchen counter at 3:12 a.m., while a bottle warmed and my son screamed like the world had personally offended him. Frank and Judith stayed with us for 5 days. They did not make speeches about family. They just became useful in every place we were falling apart. Frank bought diapers, installed blackout curtains, fixed the loose hinge on the nursery door, and took my car to have the passenger seat professionally cleaned without asking whether I wanted help. Judith cooked like she was building a wall between us and collapse. Chicken soup, pasta, breakfast burritos wrapped in foil, a casserole labeled, "Eat this when nobody has slept." On the third morning, she found me standing in the kitchen staring at the coffee maker, while holding an empty bottle in one hand and a clean diaper in the other. "Caleb," she said gently. I looked at her. "Go shower." "I'm fine." "No," she said. "You're functioning. That is different." I did not know what to do with that sentence. So I handed her the bottle, walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and stood under hot water until my hands stopped shaking. That was the part that finally got me. Not my parents' cruelty, not the voicemails, not even the drive. It was being cared for without having to earn it first. The harassment started 4 days after we came home. Blocked numbers only stop people who still respect doors. My mother and Sloan did not. I was sitting on the couch at 1:20 a.m. with my son asleep against my chest, his whole body warm and impossibly small beneath one hand, when my phone buzzed with a notification from an old public post on Instagram. The account had no photo, no followers, a username that looked like someone had punched a keyboard with their elbow. The comment said, "Some men become fathers and immediately forget they were sons first. Imagine humiliating your own mother because your wife wanted attention during your sister's important night. Sad." I read it once, then again. There it was. The same polished poison. The same careful rewriting of reality, until cruelty sounded like injury and accountability sounded like betrayal. By morning, there were 3 more accounts. One said Marin had made a scene. One said I had always been jealous of Sloan. One said Adrian had been deeply disturbed by our behavior. As if a grown man watching a woman go into labor and refusing to stand up made him the victim. Marin saw one before I could delete it. She was standing in the kitchen in my old sweatshirt, pale from no sleep, holding a bottle under warm water. "Caleb," she said quietly. I took the phone from her hand. That was all. I did not comment back. I did not call. I did not write the kind of long, devastating post people imagine they would write in situations like that. I opened my laptop. Cybersecurity is mostly patience. People think it is dramatic. Glowing screens and fast typing. Most of the time, it is closing gaps one by one until there is nowhere left for the wrong person to get in. I locked down every account, private settings, comment filters, message restrictions, tagged photo review, blocked usernames, emails, and IP patterns where I could, screenshots saved, timestamps preserved, URLs copied into a folder labeled Morgan Harassment. By noon, they could not search us, tag us, message us, or comment where anyone could see it. Marin watched me from the couch, our son asleep beside her. "Are they gone?" she asked. "No," I said. "But they're outside the wall now." And for the first time in my life, I understood that protecting my family did not require explaining myself to the people attacking it. They showed up exactly 1 week after our son was born. Saturday morning, 9:06 a.m. The doorbell rang 3 times in a row, fast and hard. Like whoever stood outside believed the sound itself should make us hurry. Marin was asleep on the couch with one hand resting on the bassinet beside her. Our son had finally gone down after a night that felt like a hostage negotiation. I was in the kitchen, standing over a cup of coffee I had reheated twice and still had not drunk. The doorbell rang again. Then came the knock. Not polite, not uncertain. The knock of people who had already decided they had a right to enter. I opened the camera feed on my phone. My parents stood in the hallway outside our apartment. My mother had curled her hair. My father wore a navy quarter zip like this was brunch after church. Sloan stood behind them, sunglasses on top of her head, holding a blue gift bag with silver tissue paper sticking out of it. Floating above them was a bunch of balloons. "It's a boy." For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen. The sheer violence of pretending. That was what hit me first. Not anger, not even shock. The violence of it. 7 days earlier, they had watched my wife go into labor in their dining room and told me to call a cab. They had left voicemails accusing us of ruining dinner. They had created fake accounts to smear Marin while she was recovering from childbirth. And now they were standing outside my door with balloons. Marin stirred behind me. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. I turned the phone toward her. The color left her face slowly. "I can handle it," she whispered. "No," I said. "You don't have to." I walked to the door. Before I opened it, I checked the camera angle, made sure it was recording, and slid my phone into my back pocket with the audio running. Then I unlocked the deadbolt. My mother's face changed the second she saw me. It softened into something rehearsed and useless. "Caleb," she said. "Sweetheart, you're not coming in." The softness flickered. My father stepped forward half an inch, already wearing the expression he used when he wanted to sound reasonable while being cruel. "Son, we drove all the way here. Your mother barely slept last night. This has gone far enough." I looked at the balloons. "What has?" My mother inhaled sharply. "This punishment, this little silent treatment. We understand emotions were high, but it's time to move past it." Behind her, Sloane shifted the gift bag from one hand to the other. "We brought things for the baby," she said. Like that settled the matter. I looked at her for the first time. "I'm not talking to you." Her mouth opened, then closed. My mother's cheeks flushed. "Caleb, do not speak to your sister that way." "1 week ago," I said, my voice low enough that none of the neighbors would hear unless they were standing close. "My wife's water broke at your dining room table. I asked for help getting her to the hospital. Dad told me to call a cab because you were busy." My father's jaw tightened. "That is not exactly fair." "It is exactly what happened. Adrian was discussing something important," Sloane snapped. "And you made it sound like everyone was supposed to just jump up and panic." I took one step closer to the threshold. "My son was coming." The hallway went quiet. For the first time, I saw the words land in the space between us. Not as an idea, not as a family title, as a fact. "My son." My mother recovered first. "And that is why we're here," she said quickly, lifting her chin. "We want to meet our grandson." Something in me went cold, not angry. "Clear. You keep using that word," I said. My mother blinked. "What word?" "Grandson." Her hand tightened around the balloon strings. "He is our grandson." "No," I said. "A week ago, when his mother was in active labor, you did not see a grandson. You saw an interruption." My father looked down the hallway like he was worried someone might come out and witness consequences. "Caleb," he warned. I ignored him. "You didn't ask if Marin made it to the hospital. You didn't ask if the baby survived. You didn't ask his name. You left messages telling me to apologize because Sloane's boyfriend felt awkward." My mother's face hardened into the woman I knew. "How dare you keep us from our grandchild?" There it was. The old command hidden inside outrage. I felt Marin behind me before I heard her. She had come to the living room doorway, one hand against the wall, pale and silent. I did not turn around. I did not want her to carry any part of this. I kept my eyes on my mother. "You want to see your grandchild?" I asked. "Yes," she said, as if I had finally become reasonable. I shook my head once. "What grandchild?" The words sat there, heavy, final. My mother stared at me. "What did you just say?" "You told me to leave," I said. "So I left. You told me to call a cab, so I stopped calling you family. You do not get to abandon my wife and son when they are inconvenient. Then show up with balloons when they become something you can photograph." Sloane looked away first. My father's face had gone pale with controlled panic. I took out my phone. "This interaction is being recorded. The camera above the door is recording. I have the voicemails. I have screenshots of the fake accounts, timestamps, URLs, and IP data. If you contact Marin again, post about us again, or show up here again, I will file a harassment report and request a trespass notice with Raleigh PD." My mother whispered. "You wouldn't." I looked at her. For once, she seemed to understand that I would. "You have 60 seconds to leave." My father grabbed her arm. "Elaine," he said quietly. "Come on." Sloane was already walking toward the elevator, gift bag still in her hand. My mother looked past me, trying to see inside, trying to catch a glimpse of the baby she had decided belonged to her after refusing to help bring him safely into the world. I stepped fully into her line of sight. "No." That one word did what 20 years of explaining never had. She stepped back. My father pulled her toward the elevator. Sloane did not look at me again. When they were gone, I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. Click. Marin stood in the living room, crying silently. I crossed to her and put both hands on her face. "They don't get him," I said. She nodded once. From the bassinet, our son made a small waking sound. Not crying, just announcing himself. I looked down at him and understood something with absolute certainty. My parents had spent my whole life teaching me how to disappear. My son had just taught me how to stand in the doorway and not move. 7 months passed. Our son learned to hold his head up, then roll over, then grip my finger with his whole fist like he was testing whether I could be trusted to stay. Marin healed slowly. Not in the clean straight line people imagine, but in small, uneven victories. A full night of sleep, a walk around the block, laughing without one hand pressed to her stomach. I got promoted to security lead in March. We did not celebrate with anything dramatic. We ordered Thai food, put our son in a onesie with a cartoon dinosaur on it, and fell asleep on the couch before the movie reached the halfway point. That was what peace looked like for us. Then Marcus called me on a Tuesday afternoon. "I heard something," he said. His voice had that careful weight to it, the one people use when they are holding bad news they did not cause. What? Adrian Vale was a fraud. I leaned back in my office chair. Heliogrid Systems, Marcus told me, had never had a working product. No municipal contracts, no predictive grid platform, no proprietary AI infrastructure, just a pitch deck, rented office space, investor dinners, and Adrian's ability to make desperate people feel early to something important. When several investors demanded an audit, Adrian vanished. Bankruptcy filing, frozen accounts, possibly fraud charges, depending on who was angry enough to push. I already knew the next question before I asked it. My parents, Marcus exhaled. They put money in. How much? About $185,000. Home equity line. From what I heard, maybe more. For a few seconds, the office around me went quiet in that strange way places do when your brain stops accepting sound. Robert and Elaine Morgan had mortgaged what was left of their stability to buy a seat on a sinking ship. Marcus kept talking. "And they're behind on the house." Sloan moved back in. Credit cards maxed. Elaine's trying to sell furniture online. Your dad told someone at a hardware store they were facing foreclosure. I thought I would feel satisfaction. I thought some ugly, honest part of me would stand up and applaud. But all I felt was tired. They had chosen a man with a rented Porsche over their own son. They had chosen fake money over a real grandson. They had chosen the performance of family wealth over the family standing right in front of them, asking for help. And the performance had finally collapsed. That was the part I did not know how to explain to anyone. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel clean. I did not feel like the universe had finally balanced some invisible ledger and handed me the receipt. I sat in my office with Marcus on the phone, staring at a blank section of my monitor. And all I could think about was my father leaning back at that dining room table with a wine glass in his hand. "Call a cab. We're busy." 3 words for the cab, 2 words for the truth. They had been busy my whole life. Busy with Sloan's recitals, busy with appearances, busy with money they did not have and people they wanted to impress, busy chasing the version of themselves they thought wealth would finally unlock. And in the end, they had lost the house trying to buy their way into a fantasy. "You okay?" Marcus asked. I laughed once, but there was nothing funny in it. "I thought I'd be happier." "You're not supposed to be happy about it," he said. "You're supposed to be free." That stayed with me, because he was right. I had not destroyed my parents. I had not ruined Sloan's future. I had not broken the family. I had simply stopped standing underneath a collapsing roof and calling it shelter. They made their choice in that dining room. I made mine on the highway. And for the first time in my life, mine saved someone. Our son is walking now. Not gracefully, not efficiently. He moves like a tiny drunk sailor crossing the deck of a ship in bad weather. One arm lifted for balance, the other reaching toward whatever person he has decided is worth trusting next. Most of the time, that person is Marin. Sometimes it is me. Last Sunday, it was Frank, who stood in our backyard holding a plastic cup of lemonade, while our son took 6 determined steps toward him and then collapsed face first into the grass. Frank scooped him up like he had been waiting his whole life for that exact job. Judith laughed so hard she had to wipe her eyes. Marin sat beside me on the back steps, her shoulder against mine, the late afternoon light turning her hair gold at the edges. Marcus was at the grill arguing with Frank about whether chicken needed to rest before serving, which somehow became the most serious conversation 2 grown men had ever had about poultry. It was ordinary. That was the miracle of it. No performance, no polished table, no one measuring who deserved attention, no one treating care like a limited resource that had to be earned through silence. Just people moving toward each other without being asked twice. Our son pushed himself upright again, grass stuck to one cheek. Absolutely furious that gravity existed. Then he saw me. His face changed. He came toward me with both arms out. I stood before he reached me. That is the promise I have made to him. Even if he is too young to understand it yet, he will not have to wonder whether his pain is inconvenient. He will not learn to stay quiet so adults can stay comfortable. He will not sit at the end of a table counting himself lucky just to have a chair. When he falls, someone will move. When he calls, someone will answer. When he needs help, he will not be told to find a cab because the people who should love him are busy worshiping a lie. I drove 73 miles an hour down I-40 because the people who raised me were too busy listening to a con man to notice my real family was in danger. That drive was the last thing I ever did for them. Everything since has been for us.